Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Eat. I am so happy that you're here. We are kicking off this week with a podcast episode recording. It is Monday morning. It is rainy, and I'm just gonna say I love this type of weather. It's a Monday morning, it's cozy. I slept with the window open last night, and just the sound of the rain, like any kind of this is just a pro tip. Anytime you can expose yourself to the sounds of nature, it is one of the best medicines for your nervous system. Whether it's the sound of the waves, the sound of rain falling, birds chirping, whatever the case is, something actually that I found so interesting. This is so interesting. I don't know where I learned this, but the sound of the birds chirping actually signals to our nervous system a signal of safety, basically, because if birds were unsafe, if they were not safe, they would not be chirping. So, by nature of the fact that they are chirping because they are safe, this signals to us as human beings and our nervous system that we are safe. So, I I just think that's the coolest thing. I truly think it's the coolest thing. And so any opportunity you have to sleep with your windows open, I know there's like a weird window of time between, you know, where it gets too hot in the summer to sleep with the windows open because it ends up being like 80 degrees overnight. But if you can sleep with your windows open at any point over the next several weeks moving into spring and summer, highly recommend that you do because it's one of the best things that you can do. It's so grounding. It's great for your sleep. So that's what I did last night. And we are heading in, Tally and I, to a good week ahead. It is Tally's birthday this week. She will be the big one. So we are going to celebrate. It is March 25th for her birthday. And so I'm going to make her some pumpkin egg cupcake, something or others, with some coconut frosting, human grade celebration here. We're making some real whole food cupcakes for her. And my workday is doable on Wednesday where we could go do something fun. So go take a walk. Tally's a little bit obstinate, as you all know, on the leash. So we'll see how that goes. But we are celebrating her first birthday, which is crazy because where has the time gone? I feel like I was just recording episodes in anticipation of going to pick her up, and now she's one. So grateful for her and excited to celebrate that. And today we're going to be talking about a topic in nutrition. And I spent all day yesterday and then this morning thinking about what topic I wanted to cover in nutrition. We have another one or two episodes in National Nutrition Month, and so I'm going to likely center them around nutrition, just given the theme of the month. But today I want to talk about a topic that I come across a ton in my work. And this is actually really important that I talk on this because I think it's coming from a a part of me that sometimes struggles with this. And then it also is coming from the fact that I have navigated this with almost every single one of my clients in some form or fashion. And I just want to share on the realities of this, what this looks like in my work, how I guide clients with this, and how it can be uncomfortable for me sometimes because I feel like what we're about to talk about, it it walks a very fine line. And being that I have a background in mental health and what I've seen in disordered eating and orthorexia, which for those of you who don't know, orthorexia is like a really like major fixation, hyperfixation on eating well and avoiding, hyper avoiding, processed foods and being ultra restrictive. It is challenging for me to guide people sometimes, especially for those who have a history of disordered eating, which unfortunately I think a lot of women do and don't realize it. That's another thing that I've learned is I think there's a lot of women out there who have really damaged relationships with food, and we just call it like being a woman. We just call it like dieting. We just call it, this is normal. But I think when you really look at it clinically, you can see, yeah, this is actually very disordered. So I want to talk about this because I feel called to, like I said, usually, I review topics, or I was reviewing topics of what I wanted to talk about. And then I'm like, what can I share on? And I feel like this topic's really important because I imagine my guess is if you're listening, whether you're a client of mine or you're just a follower of mine, you're just a listener of mine, I'm sure this will resonate with you. And I want to give you my guidance on it just from like a more generalized standpoint so that you know, like, hey, this is the struggle that I face as a practitioner when it comes to guiding people in this way. And this is what I would advise individuals in this particular situation on, what to do and how to navigate it. But then I also want to kind of shed light on what position this puts me in and how I want to be very, delicate and intentional about navigating it smoothly so that I'm not creating any kind of stress or rigidity or restriction or whatever the case may be. So this is all very vague. The way I'm describing this. So let's cut to the chase here and let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back to the table. Let's eat. Welcome to Let's Eat. I'm your host, Emily, certified holistic health coach, functional nutrition expert, and self-proclaimed wellness enthusiast, here to meet you at the intersection of physical and mental health, the space within which we become well. This podcast is meant to explore all areas of mind and body wellness, designed to offer you the integrative knowledge, behavioral strategies, and mindset shifts necessary to uplevel your health and feel better today. We'll explore nutrition, sleep, movement, self-care and stress management, habits and routines, self-development, gut health, mental health, and more. I'm so happy that you're here. Welcome to the table. Let's eat. So let's set the scene a bit here. As I mentioned, it is Monday morning. It is rainy out. It is actually pretty mild in terms of temperature. So I have the door open on the deck, which is great for Tallow because then she can come in and out. I would have my window open next to me on my desk, but I think that might conflict with my recording. So we'll keep that closed for now. But I am excited for the week ahead. I feel so lucky that I get to say that. And I get to say that because I love what I do. And I just have a lot of exciting things happening, new clients who are onboarding, new clients who are getting into testing. It's been, and I shared on this in my last family dinner episode maybe, but I'm certain I will share on it in a couple weeks in my next family dinner episode. Things in business have been crazy and in the very, very best way, in the absolute best way. So I'm just so lucky and I feel so grateful. And so how lucky am I to say like, oh, I'm so excited for the week ahead just because of the work that I get to do. Like that's amazing. This week I'm also teaching all of my classes. So 7 classes this week, which that has been, a journey, but we have found a rhythm with it, which has been great. I love it. And actually on Sunday, I'm hosting my very first of 2026 Yap and Walk, which for those of you who don't know what that is, last year, towards the end of last year, so I kind of missed out on the opportunity through the summer, but I decided to host, I guess loosely host, if you want to call it host, a walk with other individuals, women and men, if they would like to join in the area to go to the local park because a lot of these women who are at the studio live locally and go for a walk together just because I'm always walking and I love the idea of walking in community and especially as the weather gets nicer and being able to just chat and yap and share time together. So the first official Yap and Walk of 2026 is this upcoming Sunday. For those of you who are listening to this episode on its release day, this Sunday, March 29th, 2026, at Thomas Stewart Park in Stewartsville, New Jersey. If you're local, come join us, 9:30. We're meeting there. And I'm just looking forward to, as the weather improves, it just becoming even more of like there's truly nothing better than a New Jersey summer morning, like June, July, where it's like 75 degrees at 8 o'clock and the sun is out. I am yearning for that. I am so excited for that. So I am really excited because I am getting to it and we are going to have one every month and I'm excited to see where it goes. We even talked about maybe doing some sort of like coffee beforehand or coffee afterwards or whatever the case is. I mean, letting it kind of become what it becomes. So I have a group chat on Instagram where I'm going to be posting updates, which I should have done this last season, but I'm going to be updating that. So if anyone who's listening who is local wants to join us, you are more than welcome. Please bring anyone. You can spread the word. I'm going to post it on Facebook this week so that the word gets out. It's really kind of just casual. We just show up, we meet at a certain part in the parking lot, and then we just head out and do a couple couple loops, and it's a lot of fun. So that is happening this Sunday, March 29th, and I'm excited to see where that takes us. And other than that, I have my coffee with me. I've shared I'm on this journey to 8,000 followers on TikTok. And once I get 8,000 followers, I'm going to reward myself with a Breville espresso machine. So I am a little bit ambitious, but we are aiming for that by April 1st. So I have roughly 8 days. I'm actually under 200 until I get there. So if I just pedal to the metal for the next week, I think I could actually get it, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. So that is what I'm drinking right now. I'm not drinking anything fancy, just my usual instant coffee. And then I have some water with me and we are getting into it. So like I said, I am excited for this week ahead, and I'm grateful to be able to start my Monday morning with a podcast episode recording because you know how much I love these. But let's get into the topic for today. Like I said, this is something that I just came up with right before I hit record, and I think honestly, I think you've heard me say that so many times, and they end up actually being really, really solid episodes. So I'm certain that this will also be the case. I think this will also resonate a lot, but I hope that it sheds light on me as a practitioner and what I navigate and how I try to tread this topic lightly based on the client, because everyone's very individual and everyone's coming from a different perspective and they have different needs and so forth. But I feel as though this comes up time and again, and it's really important that I discuss it, and it has to do with nutrition. And it has to do with nutrition in 2026. It has to do with nutrition in our food industry. It has to do with nutrition and balance. So let's explore it. Let's get into this. So, the topic itself is all about how to really cultivate a truly healthy relationship with nutrition without veering too much in the I need to restrict and avoid and be fearful around certain foods, and also leaning into this idea of balance. And this, I think, is one of those pieces to this journey that people tend to struggle with most, and I feel as though I have to navigate very intentionally with clients based on each person, their history, and what feels right for them. Now, there are some clients of mine who I have given guidance and they have taken it up and they are happy with it and they're consistent with it. They focus on predominantly real whole foods. There isn't a whole lot of food noise or temptation or difficulty with maintaining that path. And they're very happy with it. They know this is the food I want to choose. This is the food that's nourishing for me. This is the direction I want to prioritize, and they're good to go. Is there moments where they have a piece of cake or they have this or they have that? Yeah, for sure. But they're not the type of person that's going to have that piece of cake and then let it turn into maybe like a 7-day affair, right? Where it's like, oh, I've had this piece of cake. Now my body just wants more sugar. And I feel like I can't get back on track, quote, and I put that in air quotes. So there are some clients of mine who, and this is not about someone who's better or someone who's worse. It's truly just about the person. It's about the person. So I do have clients who don't have as much of a difficulty in finding that healthy balance because they just know this is what I want to prioritize. This is what I'm going for. Now, I would say the majority of my clients that I work with and the majority of the time what I see is we do have a hard time navigating what is considered balance and what is considered food for the soul, and then what is actually what's most important when it comes to creating a healthy lifestyle, which is fuel for the body and fuel for the mind. And that's usually how I lay things out for people, right? I'm sure I've said this on the podcast before. I am oftentimes referring to nutrition as food for the body. So, what is going to nourish the body, right? What is bringing that true, you know, whole nutrition to my organs, to my cellular health, right? What is going to physically nourish me? Then there's food for the mind, which is going to be what's going to help my mental health, right? Well, been largely food for the body, food for the mind, they're the same thing, but I like to describe it as being two separate things so that we can kind of focus on, well, what am I doing today to eat for my body? What am I doing today to eat for my mind? And then food for the soul, right? That's like the pumpkin pie on Thanksgiving. That's the, going to, I don't know why this just example came to mind. I really do not know why, but I'm going to say it because it came to mind. Going to the amusement park and having Dippin' Dots. Why did that example come to my mind? I don't know. Maybe that's what I want to do. Like, I remember going to amusement parks or the boardwalk, and if they had Dippin' Dots, holy cow, that made the whole day. And if you don't know what Dippin' Dots are, Google it, okay? Because they're a godsend. God knows what's in them, okay? Who knows what allowed these small dots to remain there, to remain in said dot form and whatnot, but they were the best. So that's what I would consider food for the soul. Now, when it comes to creating a healthy lifestyle where our norm is leaning into food for the body and food for the mind, what does that then look like for food for the soul? Right? Like, what does that look like? How does that fit in? And how do we navigate that in a way that it's not stressful, that we're not, we're not creating more harm than good? And how do I, as a practitioner, guide people in this way? I think the problem is the fact that there are mixed and varying kind of thought processes that take place, that especially with all the knowledge I have around nutrition, that make it kind of an interesting argument, right? Where it's like, okay, I am not in a business, life is short, right? Life is short. And so when we say balance, we say, oh, life is short. You can treat yourself, which I really hate that language, or practicing balance. And that I firmly believe in. I share on this all the time. I think that it's important to practice balance. However, at the same time, we could also argue, and this is what a lot of experts say. There's one person that comes to mind who speaks really strongly on this on social media, and people go to town on her, right? Where they just rip her up based on this kind of frame of mind. But we could also argue, why would I voluntarily subject myself to something that is going to hurt me? Right? When it comes to sugar, when it comes to ultra processed foods. And so you could almost use that argument and say, that's actually true. Like, why are we willing to consume these foods, which we knowingly are aware they are causing harm to the body, right? They are causing inflammation, they are causing compromise. And why are we calling that food for the soul when it's actually pretty harmful for us? And I think that's one angle. Now, another angle is the balance angle that I just mentioned, right? Where life is short. And, it's about enjoying these things that are maybe a little bit more indulgent or little bit more, nutrient devoid, if you will. I'll call that. It's never going to be good. It's never going to be bad because I think that language is harmful too. But it's more nutrient devoid. Is it okay to have that in moderation? Yeah, I would argue, I think most people would argue yes. But at what point do we take moderation too far? But at what point do we have to consider, when is moderation becoming an excuse for me to have this more often than I should? So you can understand where I sit in terms of kind of a level of difficulty in guiding clients in this way, because in one capacity, I want them to choose whole foods. I want them to be leaning into what's going to best nourish their healing and nourish their bodies, and really allow them to restore, especially when they're on any kind of healing protocol, especially when we're maybe avoiding certain foods like gluten or their food sensitivities or whatever the case is, which in that case, food sensitivities can be foods that are actually very, very nutrient dense, but just for whatever reason, their body's reactive to them. But then also on the other side, knowing that that can generate some pretty toxic feelings towards food, is it wrong of me to then also encourage moderation when it comes to balance, even if that is still endorsing them consuming foods that are going to hinder their body? So it's an interesting argument, and I want to retract the word difficulty, because it's not that I have difficulty with it, but I just find it so fascinating, and this is something, like I said, that I come across all all the time, is guiding clients to a point where they're able to choose real whole foods, we'll say at 90% of the time, while also leaving space for them to enjoy the indulgences, whatever the case you want to call it, in life, but also educating them on the repercussions or the impact that this has on the body. There's actually a, a a situation that I'm working on right now with a client where we're working on pulling back on how much refined sugar that she's having every week. And it just happens to be that in the course over the course of her week, she just happens to have events with, whether it's her children or her own events, that end up serving refined sugar. Now, I feel like I'm coming up from a place of education, because that I think is a reliable place to come from. I'd never want to come from, this is bad, this is not good, you shouldn't eat that, right? Because that I think promotes toxicity, and I'm not in that business. However, I am in the business of educating on, hey, listen, these are the impacts of sugar on the body. And while it might be normalized by our culture to have sugar multiple days a week, every day a week, in abundance, right? We are vastly over consuming sugar, vastly over consuming it. And this is not normal for our biology, right? This is not normal for the body. While it might be normalized by our culture and the food industry, and there's sugar everywhere you turn, in reality, our body's not meant to take on the burden that is sugar as often as we are. And so it's up to us to choose otherwise. It's up to us to choose essentially the road less traveled, because we have just normalized eating excess refined sugar, and that is inhibitory on our health. There's no doubt about it. But it's about guiding people from the root of education, so that they understand this does not align with our healthiest self, which is always the question that I prompt every single day going throughout your day. What would my healthiest self do? What aligns with my healthiest self? Does it include having a freshly baked chocolate chip cookie because that's something that my mom makes and they're so good and they're nostalgic and I love them? Or does it include passing up on the ShopRite brand chocolate chip cookies that I really don't actually like? And does anyone really like? Because I just have no real interest in it and I don't need to eat it just because it's there, right? And I think it's about finding that balance, but this is where things can get tricky, right? And I want to be transparent about this, because of the fact that this is a real these are real experiences that I guide clients through, and I try to be very intentional about it, so that on the other side of it, we're coming out still in a space of health. We're coming out still in a space of, this is what aligns with my healthiest self. And it doesn't have anything to do with, I need to avoid, restrict, not look at it, and avoid it at all costs because it's bad for me. It's going to, cause me to gain weight. It's going to, whatever the case is, but instead looking at it as, this is not what's best for my body, right? And I want always what's best for my body. So this is something, just one example, but you can see why this is a fine line, right? Between encouraging clients to lean into balance, encouraging clients to have like a lesser, like, pressure around things like this. I think that's like one of the best ways to describe it, is like we tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves to go into these situations and like be good and not cheat and not fall off the wagon and not fall off track, or whatever the case is, whatever language we use there. And that can create more stress. That can make matters worse for us, because if we hyper fixate on being good, and I wish I was doing a video, maybe this is a sign I should be doing a video episode, because I'm doing a lot of these things in air quotes. But we try to stay on track or be good, and that creates more pressure, more tension, more buildup around, okay, I got through this one event, avoiding, avoiding, avoiding. But then what happens at the next event? You have to kind of uphold that avoidance again, right? You have to uphold that stress and that kind of like, I need to stay away from this and I can't have that. It's going to ruin my progress. It's going to whatever, fill in the blank. And think about that energy. It's like white knuckling your way through, when that's just not healthy, especially if this is a lifestyle change. Okay, that's also important. This is something that leans more into the balance court. This is kind of the idea of, if this is a true lifestyle change, this isn't something you're just doing for 6 weeks. This isn't something that you're just doing for a short period of time and then you're going to go back to the way that you were living your life. No, this is about rewiring the brain to see these circumstances differently. It's about rewiring the brain to look at nutrition in a whole different light than maybe what you're used to. And that, I think, that takes work. Okay? That takes work. This isn't about white knuckling your way through a 6-week diet plan and hoping on the other side you get to where you want to go. No, this is about choosing, I am going to do the hard work so that my approach to nutrition changes. And that is going to be the most sustainable. That's going to be the most sustainable way to create lasting change. And that's what I'm in it for, right? I'm in it with clients to teach them how to create lasting change. And I'm very intentional about how I break down guidance. I have a client, she's been working with me to this, when is it? This week will be our 6 week work 6 week, holy cow, sixth week working together. And I was straight up with her when we first started. I said, this is going to take longer than 6 weeks. There's no doubt about it. This is not like I'm going to suddenly transform your life in 6 weeks. And that is because, yes, I'm not saying that that's not possible in some capacities. Yes, I want to be sure I'm clear. But in order to create lasting, sustainable change, I can't meet with her the first day and say, okay, you're going to completely overhaul your life. You're going to make a complete 180 and change every single thing that you're doing and change all the things that you know. And now suddenly, overnight, you're just going to be a completely different person and good luck. No, I have been exceptionally intentional about how I've introduced concepts to her over the course of the past 6 weeks based on her circumstances, based on what she's navigating. And I'm very intentional for that reason, because if I tell her, yeah, you have to change in 6 weeks, we're going to be let down, right? And then she's going to leave me after 6 weeks and she's going to go right back to what she was doing because it's not sustainable, it's not realistic, it wasn't meeting her where she was, and it doesn't really lay a solid foundation for her to understand, to absorb, and then graduate to the next concept, or then to kick it up a notch, right? So it's very strategic. I want to be very clear with clients of, like, there has to be a learning period. There has to be a period of time where you're able to lay a foundation around nutrition and then get through the hard stuff, because inevitably there will be hard stuff and it might require us to rewire the brain a bit, especially if we've been operating by the same understanding of nutrition for the amount of years that we have, right? Because most cases people are not coming to me being like, I'm brand new. I don't know anything about nutrition. No, they're coming to me with pre-existing thoughts, beliefs, approaches to health. They come to me saying they know how to do the things, they just need the accountability. And usually, once we uncover what they actually know about nutrition, they realize, wait, I actually really didn't know as much about nutrition as I thought I did, because of the fact that it's no one is teaching us properly how to eat real foods. No one's teaching us how to eat wholesomely, especially as women. And that's a whole process that clients need to undergo in order to unlearn and then relearn. So, at which point does balance take a step too far? At which point do things become too rigid and we're too avoidant, where that orthorexic energy can come in, right? Like, that's not something I want to just talk about loosely, because I think it's a really serious issue. It's I don't know if it's yet in the DSM, which is like the diagnostic manual used by mental health providers, but it should be. But I think at the same time, I think people are called orthorexic, and this is another argument. Okay, let's talk about this. So another argument is, orthorexia has this reputation of being too rigid. And yes, there is, I think, a point where we go a step too far with it. However, at which point, where does that line fall where it's like, this is not orthorexic? This is this is just me prioritizing my health. And I think that, unfortunately, I think is also a fine line. Boy, do we have many fine lines here, okay? That's also a fine line, because when you think about it, I resonate with that, where it's like, at which point is it like, no, this isn't like a dysfunctional behavior. Like, this isn't dysfunction. This is me just swimming upstream against the food industry and our culture, and how normalized it is for us to eat foods that are not nourishing for us or that are harmful for us, and accept that to be our reality. If I'm choosing to not engage in that, if I'm choosing to eat whole foods instead, or to pack my own food, or to whatever the case is that orthorexic, or is that just me prioritizing my health? And I think that's the problem. Now, I do think that you can kind of sort that out with, all right, well, is there a lot of anxiety around eating that food? Or, is it, if I would rather starve than eat that food? I think that's also where things become murky, right? Where we can look at it more clinically from a more mental health lens and call orthorexia. I'm going to look up the proper definition for orthorexia so that I can speak on it more confidently as far as the definition. Orthorexia nervosa is an unhealthy obsession with eating pure or correct food, often beginning as a desire to eat healthfully, but progressing to rigid, restrictive, anxious behaviors. It causes severe anxiety, social isolation, and nutrient deficiencies, prioritizing food quality over mental and physical health, though it is not primarily driven by weight loss. Usage examples and behavioral patterns: fixating for hours on what to eat, leading to severe malnutrition; cutting out entire food groups without medical necessity; experiencing panic or high anxiety if forced to eat something prepared by someone else; spending excessive time reading food labels or researching nutritional benefits; feeling superior to others regarding food choices. Interesting. Cutting out entire food groups. Examples: all carbs, all dairy, all sugar. I I think that this is a fine line. This is a fine line. Now, if it becomes to the point where it is all consuming your life and you're unable to, I think that's this is very common in criterium, and this is where I can speak on this because I obviously use the diagnostic manual as a therapist. There is a lot of criterion throughout the diagnostic statistical manual that talks about it disrupts activities of daily life, right? Like it isolates you from daily activities of daily life. It, causes problems with activities of daily, it impacts your ability to function daily. I would argue that when anxiety and severe stress come into play, when it comes to this topic, that might border that might border more clinical concern. However, cutting out all sugar, that is, I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that definition. That it's almost like we are, if we avoid all sugar, you're pathologizing us, right? You're pathologizing me for choosing better, almost as a way for us to say, well, that's clinical if you do that, or that's diagnostic if you do that. When in reality, it's like, no, it's me advocating for my health, right? It's me advocating for my health. I'm not going to just have sugar so that I can avoid this clinical diagnosis, right? And I know that it's not that simple, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say here, where it's like, I don't want to necessarily fall into, like, I'm not in a position to diagnose people with this, of course not. However, I'm also not going to allow clients to feel like they're at risk for this by choosing better for themselves. It's just finding a healthy, happy medium that works for them and really taking it from a lens of, this is me advocating for my health. This is not about control. This is not about, avoiding foods because they're bad, they're going to make me gain weight. This is about what is going to allow me to advocate for my health best in this particular situation. What aligns best with my health in this particular situation? And I think taking that route will never do you wrong. Taking that route will never do you wrong. But you can understand why there's this line of like, at what point is taking care of myself now considered pathology? And is is it really wrong of someone, obviously with consideration to stress and anxiety, because that's not healthy either, right? You could be hyper fixated and hyper focused on eating all the quote unquote right things or all the healthy things and avoiding all the not so nutrient rich foods, right? And all the, ultra processed foods. But if it's causing you more stress and anxiety to do that, is it actually healthy? So that is important. And I'm going to say this again so that I can reiterate this. You can put forth your very best effort to invest in high quality nutrition and focus on the foods that are nutrient dense, are going to nourish you. However, if you are simultaneously feeling extreme anxiety and stress around that, it might be worth your while to look at it a little bit closer. You might have to reframe, to rewire, to take a step back, to reevaluate. And that's my job. My job is to pay close attention to when this fine line veers either way, and to help clients build awareness around it, and always recentering them with, what is the healthiest choice? And the reason I say this, right, is because of the fact that you could say, what is the healthiest choice? And the healthiest choice in that moment, the healthiest choice in that particular circumstance could be to have the pancakes with your children on Saturday morning, because why would you be over there having your egg white omelet when your kids are enjoying these pancakes and they're wondering why you're not having the freaking pancakes with you, right? That could be the healthiest thing. And that's what's important, right? Is that question will never steer you wrong, because as long as you have that judgment of what is the healthiest self? Well, is my healthiest self having, a bowl of ice cream for the sixth time this week? Maybe not, right? Maybe not, right? We can have some self-discipline and call ourselves out for maybe making choices that don't align with our healthiest self. But is having an ice cream cone at the Jersey Shore because you get it once a year, is that the healthiest thing that you can do in the moment that you're in, because you're on vacation and you're at the boardwalk and you're having ice cream with your friends, your family, or whomever? That is probably the healthiest thing, because guess what? The alternative, unless you genuinely do not want ice cream, or for whatever reason dairy just not does not agree with you and you don't want to subject yourself to that, if if you're not going to have it, I would argue that's not the healthiest choice in that moment, because then you're sitting there, everyone's enjoying their, you know, twist on a cone with rainbow sprinkles. Actually, I probably would get a vanilla. I don't know. I think vanilla with rainbow sprinkles. It's like very boring, but it's very vanilla, but it's good. I like the and extra sprinkles. You always have to get extra sprinkles on the side. But if your friends are having their ice cream and you're sitting there just being like, "No, I'm good," but you actually feel really disappointed, or you feel like you missed out, or you feel, like, oh, like you feel stressed about the thought of having it, or whatever the case is, like that I think is not the healthiest choice. Whereas the healthiest choice would be being present, enjoying, having your twist with rainbow sprinkles, and getting up the next day and moving on. And that is always what I'm celebrating with clients, because it's about your rebound rate, which is what I talk about a ton with clients about. If I'm really creating a lifestyle that's centered on real whole foods, what is my rebound rate? Am I able to have that twist with rainbow sprinkles and then get up in the morning and choose the wholesome, nutrient dense breakfast that my healthiest self is is used to choosing? Right? Where it's like I get up and I just have the breakfast I would normally have, whatever that looks like, and move on with my life. And it doesn't matter that I had the ice cream last night. I don't have to make up for it today. I don't have to do anything differently today. I just return to the nutrient dense meals that I'm used to having, that my body's expecting, and I move on and I go on with my day. And I don't think twice about it, right? I don't think twice about the ice cream cone. I don't think twice about that choice, because that was the healthiest choice I could have made then and there. So back to what I was saying, where if the choice of not having it creates more stress and anxiety, is that really the healthiest choice of not having it? I don't know. I think every instance going to be different, but I would argue more often than not, it's not. It's not the healthiest choice to not have it. Because if it's causing you more stress and anxiety to be left out versus, or rather to avoid it, and to not have it, and to stay away from it because you're fearful of it, that I think is more dysfunctional than and maladaptive than having it, being present with it and moving on. But at the same time, there are people out there that say, well, why would we subject ourselves to these foods that are inherently going to cause harm in the body, that are inflammatory? And I get the 80-20 balance. I do believe in that. I try to lean more with clients, especially on their protocols, to be more 90-10. Obviously, when we're creating healthful lifestyles and we're focusing on real whole food nutrition, I it's different than just this. It's different. The way I navigate this with clients is, if they're on the protocol based on their lab results, I want them to invest for that 90 days to the utmost degree so that they can have the greatest success, right? That's what's most important, is my client's success. Now, if I'm working with a client without labs and we're working on just nutrition and lifestyle changes, I'm going to still hold them to a certain expectation, but it depends on the nature of our work, right? Are we working on creating more of just like a healthful, sustainable lifestyle? Are we working on something specific? Are there health conditions involved, right? There's like a lot of varying factors. But I think I know this episode was kind of all over the place, but this is always the I don't want to call it a struggle, because it's not a struggle. I think this is just always the reality I'm up against. depending on each client, how do I guide them smoothly and fluidly to the destination that we're aiming for, to the rewiring of the brain, so that they're able to look at nutrition differently, so that that balance piece is still something that's respected, that's there, and also we're able to choose our nutrient dense real whole foods the majority of the time without that causing any kind of distress or discomfort. Now, is this process expected to be without distress and discomfort? Absolutely not. You're asking yourself to make a major change. And what I've learned is there's a lot of nutrition around food. Okay, Emily. There's a lot of emotion around food. As I mentioned, the clients that I mentioned at the beginning, some have no emotional there's no emotional ties to it. There's no stress eating, there's no emotional eating, but that's the minority. Okay, that is the minority. I would say the majority of people that are coming with me don't even realize how much of an emotional tie that they have with food. And also, there is a lot of stress and there's a lot of this negative energy around food. And so it takes a lot more to navigate that gracefully than just say, okay, just do it this way or do it that way, right? Like there is going to be discomfort, there's going to be distress that comes around it because it's growing and it's growth and it's change and it's stepping out of your comfort zone, and that is inevitably going to cause discomfort. Doesn't mean that it's wrong. I think one of the best things we can learn in any place in life, and I learned this myself, is just because something's uncomfortable doesn't mean it's wrong, right? It just means that you're growing. It's just different than what you're used to. And so sometimes you have to sit with that. I think most cases you have to sit with that. Otherwise, we would not get anywhere. Otherwise, we wouldn't grow. And so this process is no different when it comes to nutrition, about being able to reframe the way you see it, dismantle the narrative that we've been sold, start to be willing to say, this is going to be harder than the way that I've been living. That I think is the biggest and the hardest pill that we have to swallow when it comes to making any kind of change. This is going to be different than how I've been living, how maybe everyone else around me is living, maybe how my husband's living, how my children are living. You can change what your children are doing, of course, right? Because if they live in your household, you can make better choices for them. But that I think is the reality, that this is going to require you to step away from what we know is true about nutrition in our country, which is we don't know about nutrition in our country. We're very confused. Now, I'm so glad that the food pyramid has shifted. There's reform happening without this becoming political, right? Like there's a lot of change happening just based on the path that we're taking in that department of health and awareness and nutrition guidelines and so forth. So thank goodness more medical schools are going to be offering nutrition training. Like there's so much change in our future. So thank goodness for that, because it's necessary. However, it is up to you to kind of step a few steps back from the way you've been operating and say, this is not getting me to where I want to go. If it's not, okay, that's first and foremost. It could be. It could be. This episode could be meaningless for you. Maybe you have a good grasp on things and maybe you're doing all the things that make you feel good and you feel good about your relationship with balance and so forth. Then that's amazing. And I mean, good for you, and continue doing that and start to empower others around you to do it too, because I think that's one of the best things you can do is just to empower others to do the same. But I think being willing to sit with discomfort, knowing that we have to dismantle the narrative that we've had around food. I come across this with nearly every client of not giving constructive feedback that's too rigid, where they're feeling like it's too much or it's too restricted, but then also giving them the space to practice balance, but knowing when I need to rein them in and knowing that kind of delicate balance and walking that fine line. I think this episode might have to be called The Fine Line, because there's just lots of fine lines here. But really being able to guide clients in a healthful way without inducing fear or anxiety, and sitting with that and knowing it's delicate. And I feel so lucky. I feel so lucky, because I do feel I have been blessed with the skill set to guide clients productively in this way because of my background and because of what I know. And I feel very lucky, and I feel like I was put here to do this. Obviously, this is what I feel so strongly about. But I do think it's such an interesting argument because it's like that balance piece. We love to use that word, but at what point, and this is a hard hitter, but at what point do we use balance to justify poor choices? I'm surprised it took me 44 minutes to say this in this episode, but I have to. And this is kind of what I was saying before about the creator who talks about this. At what point do we use the word balance and use the concept of balance to justify poor choices? And if we are truly leaning into what would my healthiest self do today? How does that then align with or conflict with this idea of balance? And I think that is something that we either need to be held accountable for or we need to call ourselves out for. And we need to be willing to say, hey, like at which point is this impeding my progress or is this inhibitory on my health? And at which point are we using this concept of balance to justify the choices that are not aligned with our healthiest selves? And maybe we just need to be a little bit more aware of that so that we can improve and be more aware of it moving forward. Awareness is the key to self transformation. So the second that you're able to kind of take a few steps back and see what's going on and see what it is that you're doing and then make choices that are maybe different than what you have been choosing, because we can't keep doing the same things and expect different results, right? And then also knowing when it becomes like a, hey, like I might be going a step too far where this is causing me a lot of stress and anxiety. How can I rein it in so that I'm still able to proceed gracefully and proceed with patience and understanding and be willing to say like this is a journey and there's ebbs and flows to it, while also not allowing myself to lean too far into this balance concept where I don't make any progress, right? Where I don't move forward the way I want. And let me just say, there have been a number of clients, and love all of my clients, but there's been a lot of clients who have really tried to self justify choices over the course of our time together for this reason, that reason, excuse, rationale. This is why, justifying those choices. And I see it as just excusing the poor behavior, the poor choice as far as like nutrition goes. And I want to be sure that I am delivering feedback to them in a way that says, hey, like I understand X, Y, and Z took place. I understand you were put in a tough spot. I understand you weren't prepared or this, whatever the case is. However, how can we be more productive moving forward? Because while those reasons might be moderately valid, I think there always is an opportunity for us, especially when it's like blatantly something that could have been chosen differently. It's my job. I'm being paid to shed light on those opportunities, not in a judging way, not in an aggressive way, not in a like a how dare you and or punishing way, but more in like a, hey, how can we learn from this? What could we have done differently? And hopefully from there, change starts to take place, right? Where I'm here for your growth. I'm here for your progress. We're not here together forever, right? So the time that we have together, why don't we make the most of it? And this is how I see that we can do that. So I am hopeful that this is helpful for you. I'm hopeful that this is productive for you. Maybe this is mildly triggering for you. I don't know. I I didn't have an agenda on this topic, so I kind of just went for it. And I'm not here to trigger anyone, but I am here to spark some thought, right? And that I think is what this episode's about, is just thinking on this. I want to be transparent as a practitioner about what I'm up against when it comes to navigating these topics with clients, but ultimately I think this is one of those core pillars that eventually you will have to come up against if you're looking to choose a wholesome lifestyle. Like if you're learning to create a lifestyle that is rooted in, I want to do what's best for my health, this is inevitable. I come across this in my own life. I am not immune to this. I have gone through obviously my own journey and I'm in a much different place than I was, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but I had to go through this too and I still come up against this. And so it's important that that's considered too, that this is not, I'm not excluded from this conversation. I've just happened to grow and learn, and now I work with clients in this capacity that I have the experience to speak on it pretty confidently because I know how to hold clients' hands as they walk through this. However, every person's so different, and it's going to manifest differently in every person, and everyone's journey is going to look differently. So I have to be cognizant of that, and the pace by which I guide clients in this way is going to look differently from person to person. The steps I take, the turns I take, right? The pivots I make, all of that is all going to be very context dependent. So I can't necessarily speak generally, or this, I am speaking more generally, but for each person it's different. But I'm hopeful that this provided you some food for thought. Not only in the sense of this is the world we live in, these are the choices that we have to make, and kind of recognizing it is less convenient, it is harder to make more nutrient dense choices in the world we live in today. And so we have to be willing to say, I'm going to choose that because I know it's better for my health, and it's not always going to be easy. And I know it's sometimes going to be, it's going to be a challenge. And I think the second we're able to sit with that and acknowledge that is the second that we can say, all right, like, let's do this, right? Let's take it a step at a time. Let's move forward and then go from there. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. If this is something that you want more one-on-one support for, please know that I am always here. I feel like this is one of those things that in order for us to step out of the diet mentality, or in order for us to really create a sustainable relationship with nutrition, we will have to cross this bridge. That's just the way it goes. So I know that future clients of mine, maybe you're listening, or maybe you're a current client of mine, or I just know like this is something I'm going to routinely come up against with clients, and I'm happy to, because I do think that it can be one of the most growthful processes that clients undergo when it comes to choosing better for their health. However, it can be hard. It can be turbulent, and I just wanted to share kind of that reality about it in my experience, and then also give some food for thought around the topic as a whole. So thank you for being here. I appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing you next time at the table. And in the meantime, be well.